Okay, and welcome back to another episode of Amazin City. As always, it's Antonio Slater and Jack Ramsey. We both got some fresh cuts. Jack is looking cut. And listen, guys, it's spring training. It's the best shape for a life season, and Jack is just fully leaning right into it. He's got suns out, guns out, I guess, in Florida.
Sun
Jack,
never goes
how are
away.
things? How are things?
Good, good. We are officially baseball season.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I'll never complain about that.
Nope.
But we're underway, man. Saturday, 1:10 first pitch.
Yep, we're
Tyler McGill lined up.
about what 36 hours at this point from the first official game of spring training with the Dodgers
Oh,
and Padres, maybe because they're playing on
yeah.
Thursday. The Mets play on Saturday, as you said, and as you also said, the reports are Tyler McGill will get the first start of spring training against the Cardinals on Saturday at 1:10. Looking forward to that, man. And I'm pretty sure that game is going to be televised. So for the first time and feels like God knows how long with the slow off season, we will be watching Mets baseball. We'll be hearing the sweet, sweet nothings of Gary Cohen whispering into our ears. It's going to be fantastic. I can't wait. I can't wait to just see the guys on the field. I'm
Yeah,
ready for it.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm ready. This has probably been the quietest Mets camp since. I mean, if you're not counting 2020, we're probably talking the 2019 team.
Right.
That's pretty relatively low expectations. Not a lot of noise going into camp. Well, that's a
It's
lie.
definitely
The
the
yes can know.
quietest in
It's probably the quietest since the
the Steve
2018.
Cohen. It's the quietest in the Steve Cohen era.
Yeah, I mean, it's thinking about it, it's probably the quietest camp we've had since like the year they brought in like Todd Frazier and
Yeah.
that winter. So it's a blessing and a curse. Quiet camps are usually a good thing. Obviously it's different when you go from bringing in Lindor to bringing in Scherzer and Marte to bringing in
Sean
Verlander.
Mania.
Yeah, and now this year it's like, all right, well, there's a bunch of prospects in camp, and we have a new
Right.
manager and new head
Yeah.
of baseball ops, but they're all relatively quiet.
Yeah.
I mean, and even the Pete Alonso stuff, which has taken a weird discourse of its own, is still relatively quiet. So to that extent, I think first game's kind of crept up on you a little bit.
No,
Usually get a
definitely.
solid 2 weeks of interesting quotes and like wall-to-wall coverage. It's just felt quieter this year. I'm sure a lot of that is expectations and star
Mm.
power, and they're interested in what's going on in Tampa. You know, that's where the New
Yeah.
York media is focusing right now. Juan Soto, Garrett fall off with Cy Young, full year at Judge. Stanton looks like he lost 30 pounds. I mean, that's just how it is. So it's a good thing. It's a good and a bad thing for the Mets because I feel like a lot of the lull Mets stuff arises from unrealistic expectations and setting yourself up for failure. But a quiet, concise camp. Look, if the Mets have like a Brewers or Giants type year where it's quiet and they win, and you look up in September and you're like, oh hey, we're still in it.
Yeah.
Like I'll never complain about that for this team.
No, and I was having this conversation the other day, and I think it still holds true is that I think for the first time in a few years, this will probably be the most enjoyable we could have to watch Mets baseball because the past couple years, every game that you watch as a fan has come with expectations. You watch everything just like, okay, you're losing 5-2 against the 37 win Rockies in mid August, and then you gotta like, oh, you're supposed to be winning these games. Then you just crank out the win after a Pete Alonso homer somehow, and it's just like, okay, we won, but it shouldn't have been that hard. Now I think it's going to feel like every win you're going to enjoy that much more. Every comeback, every moment, every homer you're going to enjoy that much more because there's not that expectation. The Mets are expected to be a middle of the pack, maybe contend for a third wildcard spot team, and as a fan, I think that's going to make things more enjoyable. You can see the young kids come up, maybe see Jet Williams, maybe see Clifford, maybe see Gilbert, these kids, and all the slew of the pitching prospects that come up. It's going to be more enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, and I think like to an extent, I can stomach watching Harrison Bader put up a 600 OPS,
Right.
knowing this isn't the long term.
Not the long
It's
term
not.
thing.
It's been the first 3 years of the Lindor tenure in New York. and we're talking, what do you do about Lindor? You got to do something about that contract. What are you gonna do? And it's exhausting,
Yeah.
And I fully expect the Alonso stuff to die down as the year goes on. But it'll
Will it though?
someone will bring
Because
it back up
if
in June, and it'll
if
come
we're in
back up
mid
at the
June,
deadline.
if we're mid June, he has a around a 900 OPS and he's in the top 3 in baseball in home runs and
But
RBIs as he
I
always
don't think
is.
he will.
Is it really is the contract gonna die down? It's
I think
always gonna be in the back of people's minds.
right, and that's fair. But I think to an extent, logic says you're not going to sign Pete Alonso on a random Thursday night in May.
No.
That's just your logical points are the All-Star break, the deadline. I mean, mid-June just as like a nice barometer for knowing what you are and what your team is.
Sure.
And then the end of the year. I mean, those are your only real times where you'll get an in-season extension done.
Right.
Maybe like a random homestand while they're at home. Then you can take the time to come in at 9 for a day game or for a night game and just sit down and talk with leadership.
Especially
So
because
I think
in
to
New
an
York,
extent,
there's going to be that time where you're going to have 2 or 3 consecutive days of games just being rained out. So during that time, maybe Stern says, "Hey, Pete, get Scott up here, get Haley if you want in here. Let's finish this thing. Let's bring this thing on home."
Yeah, I mean, I do think like just talk of his impending free agency will die down. So I think at some point you're gonna start talking about other things. If Lindor starts off hot, if Marte's good, if Marte sucks, Marte will be a topic of conversation. Really, no matter what.
Right.
If Drew Gilbert has a 1,000 OPS, 30 games in, aside from the Verlander injury, the early dialogue for the Mets beginning of the year last year was Vientos, Beatty, and Alvarez destroying pitching in AAA.
Right.
So to an extent, you kind of expect that you could get a similar route this year. But I don't think the Mets will be a topic of conversation the same way the 2014 team was, in the sense that you want to be able to pay attention to it and like have opinions on it, have your work out there on it before it gets big.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to be working at the Post and you're writing about Jet Williams for the first time when he has a 950 OPS a month into his major league career.
Right.
So I think the Mets might get attention in that sense. And, it's a trade deadline. If they suck, we're going to be talking about Alonso, talking about Manaea, might be talking about Senga, so it really depends. And, they still have irons in the fire in certain places. They're still in the market for a DH. Nothing set there in terms of we're going to go get one. Right. I still maintain the easiest thing to do is just ask, tell Tommy Pham, we signed you for 1 year, $4 million last year, and you had a great year. We'll sign you for 1 year, $8 million. We'll double your salary. Make him say no. And then you have JD Martinez, and there are other names still on the market.
Right.
And it's spring training, if you're out in Colorado and you have 3 young middle infielders playing great, suddenly Brendan Rodgers is not that important anymore.
Right.
So you just never know what exactly is going to happen. And then there's always the wild card of injuries. Injuries can dictate the news for any team any year. We've seen it with the Mets.
Always be injuries in camp.
Right. There was not a single other storyline for the Mets really from middle of August through when they signed Curtis Granderson after the 2013 year than Matt Harvey's injury. That was all anyone talked about.
Right. I mean, we're already seeing the injuries
and that was like 3 months.
Up. Verlander's already having the shoulder problems after playing catch with God knows who, so he's going to shut down. Scherzer's still hurt. Matt McClain has already pulled his oblique. Josh Young strained his calf. Things are like camp just started relatively, and you're already seeing some injuries pile up, and we're not even in game action yet. I'm not saying, and I'm certainly not hoping for more injuries from any player in baseball, but injury storylines are always going to be there. They're always going to happen. It's just inevitable.
It's a sport. That's just the game.
Yeah.
So
we could be talking about Harrison Bader right now as a starting center fielder, but who's to say, and again, knock on wood, I'm not saying I want this to happen or saying foreshadowing any sort of thing. Who's to say one day he's going to be shagging fly balls and boop, there goes his ACL.
Right.
We don't know. things are going. It's just the way of the game, like you said. It's the way of the sport.
Yeah, and that's I just think talk on Alonso will just die down naturally because other things are going to pop up.
Other things are gonna pop up.
No, if the Mets are great, the talk might be David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza are the smartest motherfuckers to ever step foot in this building.
Right.
You know, like if Kyle Crick and Michael Tonkin and Jorge Lopez are lighting it up, setting the bridge to Edwin Diaz, we're going to be talking about we should never question this guy's bullpen decisions again
Right.
until he gives us a reason not to, or until
Right.
he gives us a reason to and not to trust him.
Mhm.
So, you know, it's a quiet camp, and I expect the year will more or less go that direction as well. I just it's gonna be a quiet year for the Mets, which
Yeah.
is good, you know.
You know,
It's like when you've had a
set
couple
out,
crazy X's in a row, and you finally meet a girl that focuses on studying, and you're like, whoa, all right,
this is different.
all right, let's do it. You know, like
Yeah.
it's a quiet in the New York market. I think we've kind of skipped
It's
over
hard to
that.
do.
It's hard to do, and I think you almost have to applaud it in the sense that the focus right now is okay, yeah, they're making way for these prospects.
Mhm.
Let's talk about that. Okay, yeah, you know, these signings look interesting. These guys all have characteristics and qualities. Let's look at that. It's not does 39-year-old Max Scherzer still have it in him? You know, it's
Right.
not can Francisco Lindor finally live up to his contract? When's he gonna buy McNeil the fucking car? Like
And you know what?
he
God
did
damn
it.
it, he did. I think that might be the biggest story of the Mets offseason.
That's the biggest
'Cause-
story of camp.
Jack, we've talked about this. I'm a big juju guy. I'm all about the juju.
Superstitions.
It's
Momentum.
I Jack. I'm a nutcase.
Yes,
it's it's borderline embarrassing how much of a nutcase I am. I'll say it, my wife will say it, my family will say it. I am a sociopath when it comes to this shit. The fact that Francisco Lindor finally bought the car for Jeff McNeil that he deserved a year ago, brother, that immediately did a freaking 180 on this Mets offseason. And that was the turning point. We're going to talk about turning points all year long. What was the turning point of this? Turning point of that? Turning point of the game? Turning point of who gives a hell? Jeff McNeil getting his car for being the batting champ, that's the biggest turning point. And like when we set aside like a docket of things to talk about, and one of the first things was early camp reactions. And like you said, it's a quiet camp. There's nothing to react to. And you know what? And it's so tough because even if there is, no one's having a bad camp. There's never going to be anyone who has a bad camp. Someone could sign Chris Davis off the street tomorrow, and guess what? The first thing is he's in great shape. His swings look good. He's hitting the ball. He's having a great. No one's having a bad camp. That's just
You
not going
could
to
sign
happen.
Chris Davis on the off the street, and he's still gonna park more than half his swings on the berm in right field at Clover Park.
Like the
That's
Mets
just-
signed G-Man Choi and Luke Voigt, and guess what? They're all having great camps. They all bring certain qualities to this team, guys. The early camp reaction stuff right now, it's so difficult because there's nothing to say. There's nothing to talk about. There's nothing to react to.
Yeah, like we could talk about Bader playing center field, Marte saying
Oh,
he
we
thinks he
knew
could play
that.
170 games, and you know that they're gonna try Williams in center field a little bit. Like that's borderline it.
Yeah.
Which is again, I maintain is good.
It's a good thing.
It's good.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, coming off of years of all the expectations and all the drama and all the bullshit, like it's quiet, it's good, it's professional.
Yeah.
You want to be a professional baseball team before you're an entertainment piece.
Right. And ultimately, that is what it is. It's and listen, it could be a lot worse. We could be an Angels podcast. We're talking about Rendon and the difference between what Rendon said and what Trout said literally 10 minutes before him. I'm sure as hell I'm glad I'm not in that type of spot right now. I'm sure as hell I'm glad I'm not talking about a guy getting paid $38.5 million to straight up say, I hate baseball.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're not talking about those quotes. We can, however, talk about Pete Alonso's quotes.
We can.
And I mean, really, Bless you.
Thanks.
My goodness. And there really wasn't much, like, there wasn't anything shocking from what Pete said either. The only thing, bless you again.
Thank you.
The only really thing that we can talk about, and that was somewhat noteworthy, is that he said he's willing to talk extension during the season, which typically a third time, bless you. My goodness.
Thank you. It's fucked up. It's fucked up what they're doing to me.
Things come in threes. The only reason why that's notable is because, again, he's a Scott Boras guy. Scott Boras is notorious for saying, as soon as you get to opening day, done, finished, no conversations are happening. We'll see you in the offseason.
And that the largest extension in Mets history, and in baseball history at the time, came down to a preseason deadline.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we were sitting here refreshing our phones. Well, not me. I knew what was going on. But we were sitting here just
I was refreshing my shit.
and waiting and waiting and waiting. And you have the sides aren't even talking. You're like, how the fuck are they not talking? That makes no sense. And I'm hearing that they are talking. I'm putting out there that they're talking. And then finally they get it done. But we don't have to do that. And if you talk about a quiet camp, that would be a shitstorm of a camp. I remember like it felt like every day they were asking Rojas and they were asking Lindor, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? And you're like, all right, well, opening day is our deadline. It's like, all right, well, they're 3 weeks away. They can get something done. It's like, all right, well, they're a week away, and they're still giving the same answers. And it's like, oh shit, this is tomorrow. Then the night of, you know.
Yeah. Because that was an opening day deadline.
Right. And didn't that deadline technically get extended because the Mets opening day got delayed?
Maybe. I don't remember.
Their opening day was delayed that year because of something. They might have gotten rained out on opening day.
Maybe.
Man, that was a great indicator of what that season was going to be. Well, it's obviously a good thing they're willing to talk in the season because the superficial self-imposed deadlines are never a good thing.
No.
And that's usually, to me, is a better indicator of I'm willing to go wherever. If we're going to do this, we got to get it done now.
Mm-hmm.
So being away from that, it's naturally a good thing. You want that. Where my concern lies is that this then just drags out the story.
Sure.
Going through a whole year with the stories of Alonso's not re-signing, the deadline passed, and they didn't sign an extension. That obviously would suck.
Right.
Now we're going to go through the whole year of when are they going to talk? When are they going to do it? They said they're willing to do it in season. How willing is this camp? And then the Post will say the Mets aren't willing to do it in season. And then the Athletic will say the Mets aren't willing to do it in season. Then it's just going to be a fucking ping pong.
Right.
So it's in everyone's best interest. They get it done in camp. Both sides seem so willing to do it in camp. So I do think when you have momentum, you have good.
And you saw Steve Cohen in camp yesterday, so I don't know if there's any conversations going on then.
And it's I think it would. We read this about they're resetting the payroll for next year. You have all this money coming off the books this year. You got to wait a year, and then they're going to go into that huge free agent class.
Right.
All right. Great. But how can you plan for that when you don't know what you're doing with Pete Alonso? I find it hard to plan for that unless you have, somehow already have it figured out. Plan with Alonso, plan without Alonso. And they got guys I think that can play first. If Vientos hits and obviously won't play third, he could play first. Brian Clifford's becoming a first baseman. He's not really much. He's still an outfielder, but it's trending
For how much
more
longer?
towards playing first than it is playing outfield. And obviously there's free agent class, there's trades, there's guys we're just not even thinking of yet. So it's gonna drag on. And I think it's one of those things that'll get louder as the year progresses.
So now we could play a little fun game because there's a little report today, conflicting from various things that maybe an extension for Álvarez gets done, maybe one doesn't, depending on who you read.
He said he hadn't heard anything from his agents regarding the sides talking about.
Right.
So I mean, the initial source it came from is usually a pretty good one for Dominican players.
Sure.
So it's not.
So now we can finally pose this question and have a little game here of what gets done first: an extension for Francisco Álvarez or a contract of any kind for Pete Alonso? I have to think one for Pete gets done first.
I would also say Pete. I think it's probably something they've talked about,
Right.
and look, the quickest way to sound like an idiot when talking about sports is taking general managers and executives at their word.
Yes.
The Mets were done at the deadline and we're going to look for minor moves in 2015. They weren't looking for a power bat in 2016. They weren't really interested in Max Scherzer going into 2022. Like Josh Rosen was the Cardinals quarterback. Justin Fields is still the Bears quarterback. Like,
right.
Just no. If you're willing to do that, find a new hobby, go watch soap operas.
Sure.
So you take the validity of the source who reported it, and again, usually Hector Gomez is usually pretty good with Dominican players and news regarding them.
Mm-hmm.
But on the player,
don't get me wrong, he'll have his misses, but so does everybody.
Yeah, but then the player comes out and is like, I don't know what you're talking about, and it's to an extent, it's just like, all right, well, what is going on?
Right.
Like, the fuck is happening? So I think it'd be hard optics wise for them to do anything aside from Alonso before Alonso. It shouldn't stop you.
I agree.
It shouldn't stop you at all.
Shouldn't.
If I remember correctly, Álvarez didn't even have like a 700 OPS last year. He ended up struggling, for a good chunk of time. So, I can already see it. The Mets extend unproven catcher before extending superstar Alonso. So and look, and this is gonna be baptism by fire.
721 OPS for Álvarez last year.
So and not great.
But OPS plus obviously below league average at 95.
Right. It's Álvarez. You know what he's gonna be. You're excited for it. But still, I think this is the optics game for David Stearns is going to be trial by fire.
Right.
Because you're going to find out the hard way if you can continue doing what you're supposed to be doing while disregarding the optics. You should extend Álvarez. I think you offer him 8 years, 150, and make him say no. At the same time,
maybe not that high.
If it's backloaded, I think it's fine. But at the same time, you should also be extending Senga to avoid his opt-out after year 3.
You see, that's something that you should be looking at.
It's only 400 innings for the opt-out, and he had 165, 170 last year.
I want to say 168.
Right. So he had a full season's worth. Number. He's almost halfway there.
He had 166 and a third last year.
Okay, so he's about over 40% of the way to that after 1 year. He's going to hit that, barring his elbow blowing out. And even then, we don't know if there's provisions in the contract for if he hits injury.
Mm-hmm.
So that should be something they're doing.
Because he can opt out after year 3, correct?
He can opt out after year 3 if he hits 400 innings. So it's the optics of it would be rough to extend Senga and Álvarez 1 year, before you extend Alonso in his walk year. But you should, at the same time, continue doing business as usual.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't envy the spot you're in if you're David Stearns. I think really to be able to do anything else long term, you need to lock Alonso down, or you're going to get killed in the media.
Right.
But, as we've seen them, that's basically admit before, winning in the media is very important to them.
Yeah,
they
of course.
Want to keep the positive image. So I think like 8-150 gets it done from both sides.
Oh, I think 8-150 absolutely gets it done. But I also think just based off of the other pre-arbitration contracts, you don't need to go that high. I think Keibert Ruiz signed for $50 million.
Ruiz was not. There were issues with Ruiz off the bat, though. I think, but also you have to look at what the. But I'm saying
you could probably you could probably sign somewhere in that $60 to $70 million range instead of in that 8 for 150.
I don't think so. Range. Just because you're also talking about. I mean, we're all in all saying he did not have the best rookie year. He hit 25 bombs, is already a plus defender, and had a 725-ish OPS.
Right.
So we're basically saying it was an okay, not great start for him at what's more or less league average with some above average traits for a catcher.
Mhm.
You're not concerned about the bat working long term. You're concerned about the glove. That was the number one concern since he was signed at 17. But, well, not 17, more like probably 16. But you are confident that the bat is going to play long term. And if you're Francisco Alvarez, that's what you're in his camp. That's what you're most confident in.
Mhm.
So you're basically saying, all right, you want to lock me up? That's fine. But you're basically buying out the first 3 years of free agency for what will probably be the best catcher in the game. So you probably need to backload that deal. I think 8-150, 8-160 gets it done from the Alvarez camp. You don't know if the Mets are willing to go there. But then if we're
Right.
talking about this again in 5 years, you're like, all right, well, Francisco Alvarez is going to make $40 million next year. So what are you going to do about it? So there's risk in all of it. But I mean, like Colt Keith just signed for an $82 million deal over 6 seasons.
Right.
Over 6 guaranteed, can stretch it out to 9. So you're looking at a top 50 prospect at about 10, 9 million a year. But he has not made his major league debut. Now you have Alvarez,
Right.
who's a plus defender at a premier position and a plus power bat. I think at minimum he'd have to double what Keith is doing. Just
That
looking at what the
seems
market for it is right now.
pretty harsh, but I don't know.
It is. It definitely is. But again, the argument then you get from the Alvarez side is I've already proven that my weakest link is not weak. You said I couldn't defend. They said I was gonna have to be a DH if it doesn't work out, and it might not. I'm a plus defender. You and I both know the bat's gonna work.
Right.
So he's selling himself as I'm a plus bat who can also be a plus defender. Not I'm a plus defender, but I kind of struggled in my first year last year. Because before outside of that stretch, and obviously it was a huge stretch, he looked really well. If he can manage the strikeouts, better last year, he's probably sitting at like a 750 OPS with 25 homers and a plus glove behind the plate for his rookie year. That's already a top 10 catcher in baseball.
Right.
So, I mean, I think this is something where from both sides, you probably don't want to broach it just yet. But if you're Alvarez, definitely not. Because if you hit 35 homers this year and you put up an 850 OPS, you say, all right, 10 years, 350 million, let's do it today. And then for the Mets, you're like, all right, well, that might not be a horrible deal if things go the way that they look like they will. So should they? Yes. Does it make sense for either side to do it yet? In my opinion, no. I know that wasn't
I even thought it was a little
that's
early.
what it comes down to.
I thought it was a little early to have this type of conversation from like a Mets perspective, because in the grand scheme, he's had 5 minutes of service time. I think he needs to see it a little bit more.
Yeah, he's got this year and again next year at league minimum.
Right. I think
he won't hit the 2 years of service time before 2025.
Personally, and I'm the furthest from an executive, I wouldn't have this conversation with him until after this upcoming season. If you could show me that you could have, or yeah, even the All-Star break, that's something where I think you could start initiating those conversations. Just like, listen, we're very interested in keeping you long term. We can immediately make you a Met for the first decade of your career. Let's start talking numbers. What would it take? What would your camp want? What are we willing to do? What improvements we want to see from you? And then if you could see in that second half that he continues to have 825 OPS, he hits X amount of homers, like, all right, let's bang this out before opening day 2025. And you could also kind of see how it can affect your luxury tax and your payroll going into 2025. Because another thing that I saw earlier is that if they were to do an extension with him, let's just say today, it more or less it fucks the Mets even more in this year in the short term, because it makes them their luxury tax payments even more severe. So that's another reason why it doesn't really make sense to have this conversation with them this upcoming season.
I mean, we know Cohen doesn't really care about that.
Of course he
I
doesn't
think what he's
care.
looking at down the line is, well, if you really think he's gonna be a $35 million player, let's call it 40, adjusting for year over year inflation. Would it make more sense to lock him in for 22 a year and take the risk? You're saying yes, because while the luxury tax might not matter, just because it's going to change year over year and you can work it down. You know, if you're stuck paying a guy 40 million a year when you could have had him at 22, you're going to kick yourself for that.
Sure.
So I think that's really what it comes down to is when we're looking at year 6, year 7, you know, what do you think we're paying him? You know, do we think this is a guy who is record setting arbitration numbers and is primed to be the biggest free agent since Ohtani? Or is this a guy who, because I mean, let's face it, if he would be 27, or 28, if a 28-year-old 900 OPS, 35, 40 homer plus defending catcher hit the open market, a catcher putting up those numbers, he would be the biggest free agent since Ohtani. So it's kind of a question of what are we willing to risk in order to avoid, you know, the 100th percentile outcome.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think that's something where we finally have the front office in place where you trust them to make the right decision. And I think like what you were saying is right. This is ultimately something that I think they start next winter. Because I think we're going to see the Mets be more proactive with pre-arb contract extensions and avoiding the ungodly arbitration numbers. I mean, let's face it, if the Mets had any form of organizational continuity, Pete Alonso would have been extended after 2020.
Right.
You had Brody for 2 years, then you had a pedo for a month and a half, then you had a drunk, then you had a senile old man, and then Epler did his thing for 2 years. Epler could have signed him after 2022. That was the time. That was the time. You were building, you had momentum. That would have kind of changed a little bit of the narrative of that winter. Because even with DeGrom leaving and Bassett leaving and Walker leaving, you still had Verlander coming in, but it didn't feel like, you know, we talk about the vibes in camp. Like, you can't have a bad camp as a player, but as a team, that's kind of had a bad camp. You know, like the media was just negative. But you could have fixed a lot of that by signing Alonso. But they did it. And I feel like I've said this no less than 20 times. If they had the same GM in place, you know, Nimmo would have been signed before he hit the open market. Diaz would have been signed probably after 2021. You know, they probably would have gotten another DeGrom deal done. You might have gotten something done for Taiwan to keep him in for a couple more years. You know, a lot of some of the mistakes that were made that led to some letdowns, avoidable letdowns,
right,
could have been avoided. You know, if you lock in Taiwan, you're more willing to decline that Carlos Carrasco player option.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, they ended up not doing it and ended up being the right move, but you could have locked in Michael Conforto. But yeah, and obviously, if it wasn't for the injury, who knows what would have happened?
Sure.
But you could have done that. Obviously, they locked in McNeil at a good price. You could have gotten Nimmo probably cheaper before he hits the open market and probably for less years. So you're not paying him until he's 38 or 37, whatever it is. You'd have Alonso done by now. I would have traded for Lindor a year earlier.
A lot cheaper.
Right. If you had traded for Lindor a year earlier, he's not trying to beat Tatis by $1 million.
By $1 million.
He's probably taken like 9 years, 225, 250. Which where even with, you know, discourse that there's been, I'm taking Lindor in 9 years, 250 over 10, 11 years, 341. Are you fucking kidding me? So
I want to circle back to Álvarez real quick.
They really should, but I also want to point out, like about 9 months ago, I was saying, dude, you gotta lock in Brett Baty. Like, look at how he's hitting the piss out of the ball. He's playing a good defense, and he still hits the ball hard, and he still plays good defense.
Just at people.
Yeah, he hits the ball into the worms at people. You're like, it's small sample size from the ground balls. He showed much better progress on lifting the ball in AAA. You know, trust that. Lock him in. Give him 8 years, 80 million. Make him say no.
Right.
I'm happy they didn't lock in Brett Baty for 8 years at 80 million. I mean, we could be
I
talking
mean, hey,
about
listen, yeah, because you're going to say
talk about
exactly what I'm going
trading
to
him
say.
in July or
Or we
DFAing
could
him in
talk about,
September.
maybe we extend Brett Beatty, because listen, this is a make or break year for Brett,
Brett Beatty,
without
Mark
question.
Vientos, Starling
If
Marte.
he comes out in his first 100 at bats and has a 450 OPS, deuces, sayonara, you're gone. But
Let me ask you
if he
this.
comes out in the first 100 at bats and shows a 750 OPS, his discipline is a lot better. He's actually hitting the ball in the air more. He's actually showing the prospect status that he was, and he's hitting the Christ out of the ball in the air, line drives into the gaps. We're like, hey, we got something here. Because remember, we had these conversations a year ago that of all the young guys, we had thought that Brett Beatty was the safest. He had the highest floor, maybe the lowest ceiling, but he had the highest floor.
And
We
that
haven't
was a
seen
pretty
that yet.
consensus opinion.
Right. We haven't seen that yet.
So
his
then,
floor has been pretty dog shit.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
If we're sitting here this time next year,
Okay.
or even we'll say 10 months from now, right? It's October. Season's over. Mets probably aren't. Just kidding. It's December. And Francisco Alvarez put up a 725 OPS, 2025 home runs.
Similar offensive stats to this year.
What's that conversation like? Now I think you're saying lock him in. His value's never going to be lower.
Yes.
Like the odds he puts it together for a strong third year are a lot better than he's just kind of a dud, a mediocre catcher.
I agree. I agree because then you're seeing,
then he's also seeing a level.
But then you're also seeing a level of consistency because then you're seeing a second consecutive year of him being a full-time catcher where he's putting very similar output. And if you look at the catchers around baseball, you could ask a bunch of teams, you're going to say that your starting catcher is going to have a 725, 750 OPS, is going to knock out, say, 28 home runs. I guarantee almost every team, maybe outside of Philadelphia, takes that.
Right. And I think the guys that we see that can do that do it sporadically.
Right.
Mitch Garver wasn't doing this more than 2 years ago.
No. And then I do want to say one more thing, and then I'll put a pin in this whole Alvarez conversation. An extension of this magnitude for a catcher at his age is unheard of. I'm just looking at some of the big catcher contracts, and none of them are signed at 22 years old. The only ones I could find are comparable are Joe Mauer when he signed at 23 for 4 years, $33 million. I would do that in an absolute heartbeat, but that's not going to happen. He's going to want way more than that. And then again, Keibert Ruiz with the Nationals. He signed at age 24, 8 years for $50 million. So that's at 24. That's 2 whole years ahead of Alvarez. So it's another reason why I don't think the Mets are really interested because they want to see a little more seasoning.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
So now, and the biggest contract ever by a catcher is 8 for 184. So that 350 number
is that
me, it's
Real
not
Muto?
even. No, that's Mauer. Real Muto was
Will Smith
5
is
years
gonna
for
push
115. Will Smith is absolutely going to push that.
He's going to push 200 million.
Will Smith, dude.
But here's the thing is there might
Will
be a
Smith's going to have
world
like 120 RBIs with the guys in front of him. It's going to be stupid.
there is a world where in like 4 or 5 years we're talking about. All right, let's say 10 years, 325 million for Alvarez. Is that reasonable? And you and I are like, yeah. we just might totally surpass the $200 million catcher and go from the $100 million catcher to the $300 million catcher. That's the type of player that you can see Alvarez become. Because we talk about potential. What is his potential? Well, you give it. I mean,
this is a guy that he's not far off from being the top prospect in baseball.
Right. Like when you talk about like what type of career you can have, it's hard to put numbers on it.
Sure.
Right. You give it adjectives, you give it traits, you give it, attributes. You give it scouting grades. Like, well, what really, like, what is 60? So his rookie year with a horrible start and a horrible slump in the middle, he still hit 25, 24, whatever homers.
Mm-hmm.
In a full year next year, I'm expecting 30 at minimum. And that's his second year, still not fully grown.
I don't think that's outlandish. And let's face it, he's going to be the everyday catcher.
Right. He's going to get 150 games. because he's going to DH some games when he's not catching. And
That's a
those
good
made
point.
that clear.
That's true.
He's
I
gonna-
thought
he's-
150 was pretty high, but that's when you bring that into account. I think you're closer to. I still probably think in the 140 range.
I think he'll probably start
is
like
the hope.
130 behind the plate.
Yeah,
But you also might go through stretches where, like, I don't know, let's say Omar Narvaez is really starting to swing it. You can run Alvarez. I don't know, he's done it before. You can
yeah, with the juice ball.
you can run Alvarez for a week at DH, you know?
Right.
Or, you know, maybe Omar Narvaez is on the best run of his career, and you're like, holy shit, we need to jump on this and play him as much as we can.
Right.
So, like, all right, Alva, you're DHing for 6 days. Sorry, dude. He's not gonna say no. He might be a little upset about it. Be like, okay. Especially if they're in contention. You're talking about career high, life high workloads. So I think they can't, like, and also if he's one of their best bats and they're in it, he's playing every day.
He's playing every day.
You're DHing him more.
Yeah.
You know, so maybe the trade-off is you go from him playing 135 games and he starts 130 to he's playing 150, but he's only starting like 120 behind the dish.
Right.
You know, so you don't know. But I mean, if he's one of their best bats, he's going to play more than we expect presently. So I mean, like, if he hits 275, then we'll call that an 800 OPS. Hits 30 homers. If he's an 800 OPS, 30 homers, and a plus glove, you need to lock him in David Stern's depressing office and sign him. Tell his agents about it afterwards.
8 for 110. Call it a day.
Well, I'm saying if he hits 275, 30 homers, and is a plus glove again, you give him a blank check. You give him a blank check, and then you call up Pete and you say, "Hey, Pete, I just signed Alvarez. You're next.
You're
And
next.
You go and you do that.
Can you
And
step
then-
in my office?
And then your 1, 2, 3, 4 for the next 6 years is Nimmo, Lindor, Alonso, Alvarez. Because the biggest problem the Mets have has is
Well, Alvarez will probably bat fifth once they sign Juan Soto, but
yeah, true. And then that's a good point. Then
Yeah.
you got Clifford right behind him. Then you got
Sure.
Chet and Gilbert in. But point taken. But you know, like, let's talk about the 2019 team, for example. It felt
Sure.
like their core was half supporting cast, secondary guys. To no fault of those guys. But JD Davis was not part of the core. He should be part of this year's secondary cast. You know, even Michael Conforto that year should have been part of the secondary cast. But they were forced to be core players because of the lack of what the Mets had. So it's got a chance that he's their best homegrown core player since David Wright. So I think if you're the Mets and you get the chance to lock that in, you jump on it, because a prime Alvarez who reaches his full potential is better than McNeil, better than Alonso, better than Nimmo. Probably no best core position player since Wright. It won't be a better major league career than DeGrom, but your best homegrown position player.
I think it also goes back to the conversation that we've had, God, 55 times at this point.
A million fucking times.
It's retaining your own guys.
I knew it's exactly where you're going with that.
For so long, they haven't been able to do that.
And I don't count Diaz and Nimmo as retaining your own guys, because you get that done before
I
they
count
hit the market.
Nimmo. I count Nimmo because he was drafted by them.
No, right. Well, I'm saying in retaining your own guys, I don't count. They brought him back. I wouldn't say they retained him. They let him hit free agency.
For a while.
They're lucky that Ross Atkins had some weird faith in Cody Bellinger that he'd have a great year, and for some reason still hasn't signed him. But like, they could have said, you know what, fuck it, we really need Brandon Nimmo, and they could have thrown insane money out of him and would have made the Mets make a move. And who knows, maybe they weren't ready earlier in the winter. So they need to prevent their own from hitting the open market.
Yes.
They let Diaz and Nimmo hit the open. Good job with McNeil. Good job with Lindor. But let's get to 500 here.
Mm-hmm.
Got to get Alonso done. You know, then you can talk Alvarez. I hope we're at a point where we're talking Beatty.
That'd be nice.
You know, and then hopefully we're at a point where we're talking, like, is it time to lock in Christian Scott? Is it time to lock in Mike Vassell? You know, like,
Right.
hopefully we get to that point. But you know, we've said it a million times. You have to retain your best. And if you can't, especially in New York, gonna be tough because then you're also adding the, all right, we had to replace him with this free agent we overpaid for. Oh no, he's somewhat underachieving. Now that's all anyone's talking about.
They need to stop and then you get out of their own way on this one. Just do the obvious.
You want me to keep talking?
No, I was just typing one thing real quick. But yeah, without question. Without question.
Yeah, they need to get it done. That's really
They need to get both those done and just make sure that both Pete and Alvarez are here long term. And like you said, maybe Vassell, Scott, Prospect X. They come up, they do something, they're like, you know what? Let's jump the gun. 5-year deal for whoever it may be. But now let's do a little transition. It's a little bit more of a lighter segment, have a little more fun here. Let's do some player over-unders. I'm going to give you 5 guys, and we're just going to go, do we surpass this number? Do we not surpass this number? Let's start with Pete. Let's set his over-under on homers.
Over.
It's the right answer, but we'll still throw out the number here. 41.5.
Over.
No question.
I think that would be the second lowest full season mark of his career. With the lowest being 40 in 2022.
Right, or like 30, high 30s or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, because he gets 6 hit. I think that would be his full season. I think like maybe it's like 37. But that would be of his 5 full seasons. That would not be one of the 2 highest because he got the 50 and then the 47 last year. He's gonna hit 200 home runs this year. Not even like even mentioned. Let's say he fucks around and gets 60 home runs, right?
Right.
We've seen it happen by an elite power hitter in the non-juice ball era. Not totally out of the realm of possibility. He would be pushing the franchise record.
Yeah.
By a guy that
like he's gonna hit 200 career homers by the end of April. He's really 8 away.
I want to know what the list is for guys who hit 200 homers before hitting for the open market, like before finishing their 6 years of service time. It's that list might not exist. It might just be Aaron Judge.
Hold on.
Or Stanton, probably. It's probably Stanton.
Try to find that out for you. But
let's see,
as I'm looking into this, his home runs by season, and we're going full season, so fuck 2020.
Even
dude,
2020
his 2020 numbers are going to mess him up so much because of the 60-game season. So we have 53, 37, 40, and 46. That's absurd.
Yeah.
He has the most home runs and RBI by a mile since he came up.
All right, let's see.
Are you looking into it as well?
I'm looking at Stanton. I think 2016 was his 6th full year of service, and his homers went 22, 34, 37, 24, 37, 27, 27. That is a total of 208. So 208 is probably the record for most homers hit before 6 full years of service time. We'll call it 200 because he was probably a little over by the end of the 7th year because he came up like June of his rookie year and then missed a lot of his. That was that one season he was really hurt for Miami and missed a while.
Yeah, he's gonna blow past that.
Right, so you're looking at 200 probably, which means Alonso is probably 8 homers away from being one of probably 2 people to hit that many homers before 6 years of service time. I mean, they showed the stat last year. His at-bats, his homers per at-bat,
best all time.
per homers. It's like top 4 all time. And it's better than the guys who were juicing.
Right.
It's just, get it done. Over on 41.5. As I eat my big ziti.
Nice. All right. Next. Let's go from one superstar to another. We'll go Francisco Lindor. Let's go RBIs. In his 3 years with the Mets, his average per season is 89. I'm going to set the over RBI Words are hard. Let's see. In his last 2 seasons, he's gone 107 and then 98. I'm going to set the line at 94.5.
I'm going to take the under.
Taking the under?
I think a lot of what he benefited from was a solid back end of the Mets lineup. In 2022. But I don't know. That's going to be Harrison Bader and DJ Stewart this year.
Well, DJ Stewart's going to win MVP, so.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the under because that feels like the safe bet.
Okay. I'm fine with that. I can see that definitely going under. Edwin Diaz. He's back from his injury. Again, all reports are he's looked really good, but again, it's camp. Everyone looked great.
Never heard of someone who looked horrible in camp.
Exactly.
Maybe Pablo Sandoval when he got to the Red Sox.
Well, he said consecutive seasons with the Mets in 2021 and 2022 with 32 saves. So let's go 30.5 saves for Edwin Diaz. This is a tough one.
I'm gonna over. I just think the Mets play a lot of close games this year.
And that's obviously going to be the case.
Yeah, I think a lot of their wins are close wins. And you don't
See,
really
I think
have the other
it's tough
viable
because,
option
again,
in the
it's
back
not.
end of the. You don't have the other viable option to come in and close out games
So
like
we
you've
think.
had in other years with Diaz.
I mean, no, they're not Edwin Diaz, but
No, right, but in other years,
just-
like last
my
year,
only concern would be if they try to manage his injury so they don't want to put him out there for the first couple months in back-to-back days. Maybe if they try to give Jorge Lopez an opportunity, and Ottavino an opportunity, and Fujinami an opportunity.
as long as it's not Drew Smith.
I'm so concerned about that kid. I went from being the president of the Drew Smith fan club to, man, he might be DFA'd by June.
Yeah, after he gets DFA'd, we can have him on.
Christ.
So what happened, Drew? Well, I suck.
Drew, what happened there, guy?
Drew, I said a lot of things about you. You made me look bad.
I put you in the elite category on a tier list one time. Got a lot of shit.
I think I'll take the over on Diaz.
Yeah. Now let's go. I'm not even going to look up this person's past because it's not going to match anything. Brett Beatty. I'll set his OPS 620, 625.
It was only like 598 last year, and he won't be as bad as he was last year.
That's you hope so.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if his OPS was under 700. The most possible outcome, the most likely outcome, in my opinion, that's also easily the most annoying, is he's good, not great, with flashes of being pretty good. And we go into next year like, all right, what do we expect out of Brett Beatty?
Mm-hmm.
And we're just doing this shit again next year.
Right.
No, we're like, all right, he's good. Is he World Series good?
Yeah.
Is he starting third baseman on a playoff team good? I don't know. I mean, but that's a better conversation than, can this kid play? Like,
right.
Is he capable of anything? So,
yeah. I mean, listen, I'm also going to take the over more so because the Mets need it to be over than I think it's going to be over.
I think
Because
we'll see a little more power this year.
if the Mets are going to do anything, Brett Beatty is at the very top of the list in terms of X factors for this team. Because you're at the point now, we're going to get from Lindor, we're going to get from Pete, we're going to get from Nimmo.
Yeah,
and it's pretty much everybody out. The two top guys on the list of X factors for this team in 2024: Starling Marte, can he stay healthy? And Brett Beatty, can he do anything? Can he give you some sort of production offensively?
Yeah, even if he's like a 725 OPS with a decent glove, that's their best third baseman
since David Wright.
Go ahead and say it. I mean,
Yeah, an offensively average third baseman with a slightly above
Todd
average
Frazier?
glove
I mean, shit.
is their best third baseman since David. Oh my Jesus. God, Escobar sucked. We wanted him to be good so bad.
He's so likable.
Paul.
It's Paul. It's our guy.
Yeah, I mean
Love Paul.
JD was horrific defensively.
And
how much
truly
of-
the worst defensive third baseman I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah, and then he just wasn't a third baseman.
Right.
Motherfucker gave way to Joe Panic.
Yeah,
Oh,
he did. Yeah, he did.
private Queens, New York. Yeah, I mean then Frazier was not great. Who was the third baseman in 2017? No one good if I can't remember.
Eric Campbell?
God damn it, I'm gonna pull it up. But yeah, I mean, a healthy and productive Brett Beatty is very. Oh God, it was Wilmer.
Oh, that's right.
110 games, 800 OPS, 18 homers. That's pretty good. Yeah, and the year before it was Wright, and then when he got hurt, Jose.
Oh my God, that's right.
But yeah, I mean that's like a 725, 750 OPS, 15 to 20 homers, and average to slightly above average defense is their some fucking way. Their best third baseman in damn near a decade. And that's not even counting in that Wright was not good in 2015. He was okay in 2015. He wasn't good and barely played in 16. 14 was a down year, correct? Or was that his
14 was a
last?
down year.
Right. So it would be their best season by third baseman since 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
Yep. We'll go one more over under, and then we'll hammer this home. We'll go with the birthday boy, Luis Severino. Over under 135 innings.
Way under.
Way under.
He's gonna get hurt. They're gonna manage his innings. I also don't think he's that good. So I think he might have a handful of 4 innings, 6 runs. Yeah, no, I don't think that one's gonna last very long. I wouldn't be shocked if he's cut by deadline.
Wow.
Especially if a like of Hamill, Vassell, Scott, Jarvis are pitching really well in AAA. He's Severino's the first one to go meet things.
Fair enough.
Because if they're good, a big reason why is going to be another good year from Jose Quintana.
Mm-hmm.
So then at that point, you're looking to extend him. You have Senga. Manaya's worth keeping around for the 2 years, just because he also showed flashes as a reliever.
Well, he can opt out this year.
Yeah, but who the fuck else is this? Who's the other starter?
Hauser.
Yeah, I mean, well, maybe it's move Hauser to the pen and move on from a struggling reliever. But Severino is one of the first 2 guys on the chop block if shit hits fan. And you got to give away the younger guys at that point, which I think is likely the case.
Right, then I'll throw one more. I'll throw one more at you. This isn't over under, just the overall. What are your thoughts? Who's the first pitcher to make a debut?
Probably Vassell, considering I assume they have a plan for Scott in the sense of innings and easing him into a workload. I don't think they'd have that for Mike. Pitched a lot at Virginia. Threw a lot last year. Threw a lot the year before. Like I'm not really sure you're planning on like easing him in. It might just be like, all right, Mike, go out and start.
Right.
Go pitch. Like a major league style, like you monitor the pitches and the innings and the depth and the stress pitches at first, but you're not really too worried about that anymore come May. So
right.
I would guess him. Justin Jarvis is another one just because I think that's a guy they have no problem throwing in the pen. So like, if you're getting shorter starts from Senga and Quintana and Jarvis and Severino, and you need a long guy, that him or Hamlet might be the first call there.
Fair enough.
But I mean, it just depends on what they do with McGill. That's
Yeah.
what so much of it comes down to is he just kind of chopped liver at this point? Is he the guy they're showing off to try and trade?
Depends on that spork.
Yeah, there's a lot still up in the air for him.
All right, man.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
No. No, I'm gonna go fuck up my big ZD.
There you go. Love that. That's a good final thought. All right. Well, damn straight. I'm gonna go have some ravioli myself. So I get it. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Amazin Citi. It's Tony Slater. It's Jack Ramsey. As always, I love GM.
We're gonna go eat.
That's right.